From the Oklahoman newsroom, this is an OU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio. The Oklahoma men's basketball team is taking a little bit of a break. Played last weekend and won't play again until this next weekend, Saturday, facing USC in Tulsa. We'll talk about that game in just a minute. But Joe Masato joins us on the phone to talk about issues related to the Sooners. And Joe, right now, probably the biggest question mark with this team is injuries. They've had some guys hurt. What's the latest on those guys that have been hampered a little bit by injury?
Right. Jamani McNeese is the one to keep an eye on. He's missed OU's last two games, the senior starting center. He had a right ankle sprain, and he's kind of been slow to recover from it. They thought he might be available 2 games ago. He missed that last Tuesday against Notre Dame. He was held out again Saturday against Wichita State, and I was out at practice yesterday, and he still wasn't with the team. He was just sort of doing light footwork drills. So he's the team's second leading rebounder, the second leading scorer, and their best interior defender, and his backup, junior college transfer Kirk West, he's actually out with a back injury, so they're really thin in the front court, but it really hasn't impeded their ways to win. So, but Jamani McNeese is a big part to their success moving forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they have not faltered with him on the bench. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But this game against USC on Saturday, this week has been a light game week because of end of semester stuff going on campus for the Sooners. But let's talk about this matchup because this USC team, Sooners faced last year as well and had a nice win against USC a year ago. Now this game in Tulsa, BOK Center, it's an 8 o'clock start on Saturday. What about this matchup this year for this Sooner team against USC?
Maybe not as intriguing as a matchup this year as last year. I mean, I think obviously there's the brand recognition between OU and USC, kind of a fun matchup on a neutral court at the BOK Center in Tulsa, but Andy Enfield's team just had the biggest loss they've had since he took over as coach. TCU beat them by about 30 at the Staples Center last week. So, you know, TCU is a team that OU is probably about on par with in the Big 12. So just based on that result and the losses that USC's sort of piled up here in the recent weeks, it should be a game that OU wins. But nonetheless, it's another game that could boost their non-conference schedule.
Yeah, and Joe, right now, I mean, the Sooners have gotten off to a really hot start. I was going to say unexpected, but I don't know. I mean, how do you sort of gauge just how the Sooners have played here in the early going? I mentioned they weren't struggling to win. I mean, last week, Wichita State, albeit a down Wichita State team, comes to Oklahoma City, and OU rolls right through them. What do you attribute this hot start to?
Well, I do think it is unexpected just because their schedule has been one of the toughest in the nation to this point. I mean, we're in mid-December, and they've only played 2 home games. Everything's been neutral site, tournament games, or road games, and they've really handled that well with their only loss coming to a ranked Wisconsin team. So, you know, non-conference wins, like you said, over Wichita State, Notre Dame, Florida, Dayton. I mean, it's been really impressive, and I think the thing you really point to first is Christian James. He's averaging 19.2 points per game. He's been one of the best scorers in the Big 12 so far. And, you know, talking to him yesterday, he basically just attributed it to his confidence this year. And, you know, this team talks about having fun and moving the ball around, and they're playing a totally different way. And obviously they were in great shape last year with an all-time freshman in Trae Young. But Trae Young's departure has forced this team to play a completely different way because they don't have that one guy they can rely on. So, you know, Aaron Calixte and Miles Reynolds, 2 of the graduate transfers, they've stepped in. Brady Manick stepped in. McNeese. It's just sort of been an all-around effort, and that's led to some really positive results.
You know, Joe, lastly, you mentioned Trae Young, and I'm wondering, when you look at this non-conference schedule, such a tough non-conference schedule, a lot of people thought when Trae Young showed up at OU, he would be at least a 2-year guy. Is this Sooner team playing a schedule that they thought they'd have Trae Young for and still playing pretty well against it?
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I have asked quite a bit about the schedule and the process that went into it because, you know, it's a schedule that not too many Power 5 teams are playing. A lot of Big 12 teams, a lot of other, you know, major conference teams rack up a lot of home games to start the season with because obviously you split home and road once the conference schedule begins. But basically, they just said, they looked at the postseason metrics that the committee uses. This year, it shifted from the RPI to the new net ratings. No one really knows. They haven't been transparent as to what that formula is for these new rankings, but it's clear that neutral and road games are weighed much heavier than home games. I think they've seen that and they've adapted to it. And I mean, we'll see come March. Obviously, there's the whole conference slate to go, but I think you're going to see positive effects from them playing this road heavy slate to start the season.
All right, Sooners back on the road, albeit a neutral site on Saturday night, 8 o'clock in Tulsa at the BOK Center against USC. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.